Test. responsiveness to societal needs and values in nanotechnologies and beyond. We're again today very excited to see you. We're very excited to have you here with us, and we're looking very much forward to continuing our discussions from the last 2 weeks and even raise and delve into even more and new questions today. My name is Lise Spitz, and I'm the coordinator of GoNano on behalf of the Danish Board of Technology Foundation. I'm your host for today, and I welcome you on behalf of all our GoNano partners. Our conference, as you could hear, has been split into 3 sessions of 3 Thursdays, 3 weeks. And so today is our last Thursday afternoon session. In the sessions before this one, we have looked at the potential of co-creation and engagement for research and innovation. We have talked about the importance of gender equality and diversity for research and innovation. And we have taken a deep dive into the engagement and co-creation process that we organized in the GoNano-project. We've heard testimonials from participants in the process, and we introduced to you some tools and guidelines that researchers and engineers, citizens and civil society organizations that would like to organize or get involved with research and innovation can use themselves. So the recording of all of that is already available on our GoNano YouTube channel. Today, we have 2 main sessions. The first is a policy roundtable. Our participants in the roundtable will help us discuss a few of the policy recommendations that we have made within the GoNano project on how to support practices of societal engagement and uptake of the needs and values of society in research and innovation. That's the first session of today. Then we have invited representatives from a number of other Horizon 2020 projects who have also worked in each their way with societal engagement to share with us their lessons and their perspectives on future work. That's the second session of today. We end today with an informal networking session, and you're all invited to please stay on after the official conference ends and to grab this opportunity to speak a bit more informally with all of us. Now, to help us get through the day and get through these topics, we have with us today a really excellent and rather big group of speakers, 10 in total. All of these different speakers are joining us with a wealth of expertise and knowledge, insight from EU policy and innovation strategies on nano and on key enabling technologies, from the food and food safety aspects, also from the aspect of sustainable chemicals, from gender perspective, and from industry expertise on health and nanopharmacy, and also from public research organizations with insights and expertise in solar energy and energy transitions, and finally experts also with a background in societal engagement, working with that and working within the framework of responsible research and innovation in European research projects. I will introduce in more detail these 10 speakers once the sessions get going. I also wanted to let you know that throughout the conference, we are, as always, very interested in hearing your questions and hearing your thoughts and ideas. And there will be multiple opportunities inserted in the program for you to ask questions. Now, I am your main host today, but I'm not alone. My co-host today is Harald Trone Holst from Oslo Metropolitan University, and he will be mainly taking care of the second session of today. And also, I have with me from Oslo Metropolitan University, Paul Strandbakken. Paul is our chat moderator today, and he will make sure that all the questions that you ask are received and sent to us as the moderators. Also, we have our art director, Søren Jepsen, with us. And Søren, he is a graphical artist, and he will try to transform our conversation into a graphical representation. And we will check in with him at several points in the conference to see how that is going. Finally, but certainly not least, I have also with me my colleagues, Sigrid Neuheis, Mette Simonsen, and Rihanna Bock. And they have been really the glue that holds this whole 3-week conference set up together at the technical, but also at the organizational level. And if you don't notice the technique that it requires to run such an online conference, that's because they are doing such an excellent job. So thank you to them. Now, just a few additional points by way of sort of housekeeping before we can begin. I think you have maybe already noticed, but we use Slido for your input. So not the YouTube chat. The YouTube chat is only for technical assistance. So if you have any problems, you can ask for technical assistance in the YouTube chat. In Slido, we also have a Q&A. As I mentioned, we would really like to receive your questions throughout the whole conference. So there's a Q&A function in Slido, and you are really very much welcome and encouraged to ask your questions there throughout the whole event. It's also possible to vote on questions asked by other participants. If you think that they've asked something really interesting or important that you would also like to know. By voting on their question, you signal to us that it's a question or an observation that others also find important in the audience. Now, if you haven't already seen this Slido app, it's really now is the time to go to it and log in, and you have to use the event code #GoNano. There is already now an event running in the Slido app called "What country are you joining us from?" And we should have some results, I think, already from that event. But I can't see them right now. Okay, they will probably appear later. Okay, final two things that I have to also let you know is that this session is live streamed on the GoNano YouTube channel. And also one last point, which I'm pretty sure it's probably not necessary to mention, but we would of course like to ask everyone to keep a respectful language in asking questions and asking for technical assistance. Okay, I think that was it for the housekeeping and all the practical information, and that we are now ready to begin with the first point on our program, which is the policy panel. So that completes our stage change, and welcome to the policy panel, the first item on the agenda for our conference today. The policy panel, a roundtable today, is on how to support and practice responsiveness to societal needs and values in research and innovation. And today I will be your host for this session. As I said, my name is Lise Bitz from the Danish Board of Technology Foundation, coordinator of the GoNano-project. Before we begin this session, I would like to ask you to, please ask your questions in the Slido Q&A throughout the session. I would also just like to let you know that I'll be running a few events in the Slido Q&A, or in the Slido app. So if you're in there will be a few questions for you to engage with throughout this introduction. Now, I'm also not alone in this session, and I also already mentioned that we have a large number of speakers, and 6 of them are in this session. Before I go on, I would like to introduce them a bit more who they are. Our first panelist today is Nicholas Delianakis. He's head of sector economic and social transitions, working with the European Commission for DG Research and Innovation. Welcome, Nicholas. Then our second panelist is Wim Sinke. He's a principal scientist at TNO Energy Transitions, and he's also a member of our GoNano advisory panel. Hi, Wim. Our third panelist today is Anna Maria Rincon. She is Senior Scientific Officer at the European Food and Safety Authority. Welcome, Anna Maria. Good to see you. Okay, our fourth panel participant today is Andrew Kope. He's a policy officer working on sustainable chemicals with the European Commission, DG Environment. Welcome, Andrew. Fifth on our panel today, we have Anne Pepin, a senior policy officer working on gender, also with DG Research and Innovation at the European Commission. Welcome, Anne. And our sixth panel participant today is Lucy Bailusilova, who will help me later pronounce her last name correctly. But Lucy is a quality manager at Nanopharma. Welcome, Lucy.
Welcome.
Okay. And my panelists today, they will help us reflect on a number of policy recommendations that we have made in what we call the GoNano white papers. But before we move to that part of the session, I just want to briefly, again, maybe for some of you, but for others, this will be the first introduction just to the GoNano-project and how these policy papers came about. Okay, so first off, the GoNano-project. So the GoNano-project, it's been a 3-year project with the goal of showing a process to which citizens, private professional stakeholders like researchers, policymakers, consumer representatives can collaborate, can create and can discuss ideas for future nanotechnologies and develop suggestions that are taking into account societal needs and values in a better way. And then the big question probably might be why we wanted to do this. And from the GoNano consortium, we start from this motivation and belief that so the complex challenges that we face these days as a society, such as, for example, climate change or questions on better management and treatment of disease, that they cannot be solved by isolated innovation in academia and industry and business. But instead, innovation must be a joint process and change must be a joint process. And therefore, we need to involve experts, for example, from civil society, from policy and from business, academia, and also citizens in a joint process with the aim of developing a deeper understanding, both of the issues, but also of the opportunities for solutions in order to change our present day practices. So in the GoNano-project, we set out on this journey to see how we could do this in practice. And we did that in 3 countries across Europe, and we focused on 3 thematic issues as well. So we discussed health and nanotechnologies in the Netherlands. We discussed food in the Czech Republic and energy in Spain. Now, how did we then do it? How did we try to make this work in practice? Well, you have already, I think, in front of you a representation of our process. So the circle is the 4-step process that we set up in order to try to realize this in practice. We started with with the citizen engagement meetings in the 3 countries, and the aim of those meetings was to try to get a better understanding of values, needs, concerns in relation to future visions of nanotechnologies within these 3 topical areas. And we then presented the outcome of that exploration to a mixed group of stakeholders from public research, from industry, and from civil society. And also some of the citizens from the first meetings took part in these mixed group meetings. And we asked them to reflect on the outcomes of the citizen meetings and engage in a co-creation process to try to see how they could connect to their research or development processes. We then took these suggestions that came out of the workshops in the different countries into an online process where citizens were again invited to vote on the suggestions that came out of the first round of workshops. Following the voting process, we had another round of stakeholder workshops where they again were in these mixed groups were asked to continue on the co-creation process and try to come up with concrete suggestions for how future nanotechnology product ideas or concepts could look like. Okay, and I also, from running this process, I want to introduce you to just a few of the key insights that that we came up with in this project. So overall, we managed, and we think that our experience shows some insight into the potential of using a co-creative approach to enhance understanding of and integration of societal needs and values in research and innovation. We have some examples of actual suggestions for future nanotechnology products and concepts to show. We therefore conclude that this type of process that we set up, a guided interaction, because we facilitated this whole four-step process between different types of stakeholders and including citizens, can actually lead to novel suggestions on how to integrate societal needs and values. What we also learned from this process is that learning and mutual learning is really a key aspect, and that it takes time, because we have been mixing participants from very different backgrounds and getting to understand and getting to speak to each other and learn about each other's viewpoints takes a bit of time. But also what we learned from our deep dive last week was that once participants sort of recover from the culture shock of speaking with stakeholders outside of their own normal sort of atmosphere, that it's really an experience that they appreciate and learn from. Then in our project, we didn't just want to set up good dialogue exercises, but we actually also wanted to take a step towards action. And we found that setting up a good dialogue, it's hard enough, but then taking this step towards action is also really a big challenge. And it's a big challenge because you have to really translate between these many different backgrounds, and you also have to translate from abstract values to concrete products, and then discover what could be opportunities for action. So that's a challenge. Finally, our fourth sort of key insight from running this process is that it's really important that if you want to do this even more, want to support more focus on societal engagement and more focus on integration of societal needs and values, there needs to be sort of a careful process of figuring out where are the opportunities actually also for action, and where do they where are not only opportunities, but where are also desires to try to change, and those two have to overlap. Okay. Finally, we had three sort of pieces of attention points if one wants to organize good co-creation processes. There are three main attention points according to us. And that is that you have to address really the interests and motivations of all your participants. And that is already a big challenge because you have so many different kinds of participants in your process, all with each their own motivations and interests. And we have developed a number of tools and guidelines for how you can do that in this project. Then, as I've already mentioned briefly, you have to really translate. You have to translate between the actors, and you have to translate between needs and concerns of very different stakeholders and at different levels of abstraction. And again, to run this co-creation process, which in our case is a process that took place over a longer period of time, you have to really pay attention to how to find these connection points between abstract values like sustainability and specific opportunities for action. Now, we come to the GoNano white papers and the policy recommendations that we made. So the 3 white papers are the basis for the policy panel discussion today, and one of the 3 key outcomes of our project. The white papers, they were developed not only by us, but they were also developed with input from participants in our co-creation process, and we also invited anyone in our surrounding environment who wanted to contribute and comment on the white papers to also do that in our development process. But the 3 white papers, they provide insight into different aspects of co-creation and responsiveness in the field of nanotechnologies. And each paper addresses this question of responsible research and innovation from a different angle, one would say. So the first of these white papers, white paper 1, is the one that sort of establishes the foundation for why co-creation and responsiveness makes sense in nanotechnologies. And it describes the conceptual and the empirical aspects of trying to ask for and trying to build responsiveness with researchers and engineers in co-creation processes. And therefore, this white paper is also mainly addressed to researchers and to engineers and other stakeholders involved in the research system, like, for example, research funding and research institutions. Now, I have the first Slido poll, so the first event running, and the question is, what category describes you best? We're, of course, also curious to learn what are the different audiences we have with us today. Okay, white paper 2. That white paper then tries to take the step towards more strategic focus on how to implement co-creation, considering this whole research and innovation ecosystem. How can one do it? And therefore, this white paper addresses more policy, industry, business and research institutions who are active in this ecosystem and are each in their own way, of course, influencing how that works. Okay, my second event in Slido, these ones are going fast, is who do you think should take responsibility to create incentives for increased societal engagement with research? Okay, and finally, the third white paper looks at a specific aspect in relation to co-creation processes. And this white paper looks specifically on how to realize and how to take into account the gender and diversity perspective in co-creation processes. And it also looks at it in relation to research and innovation products, how to better integrate these concerns into nanotechnologies related research and innovation. And the main addressees of this white paper are organizers, for example, of co-creation processes, engagement processes, and researchers, and again, also policy. And now I have my third event to keep your toes. Do you think we could develop better innovation if we consider gender and diversity more systematically. Okay, and I will return to the results of this towards the end of the session, also as input to our discussion in the policy roundtable. Now, we've come to the roundtable, and I would like to now introduce to you the 3 questions that we asked our policy roundtable participants. The overarching question for this roundtable is, what are your experiences and what are the opportunities for opening research and innovation in nanotechnologies to societal needs and values and co-creative approaches? And we divided the participants in our panel in groups of 2. So these sets have received the same question. And the first question is the one that we prepared for Nicolas Stylianakis and Wim Sinke. And their opening question is taken from the GoNano white paper 2 on co-creation in practice, enabling multi-stakeholder collaborations in nanotechnology research and innovation. And in that white paper, we make an argument that we have identified several areas where working more co-creatively, it could help to address some pressing policy issues and societal issues, such as standardization, classification and definitions of nanomaterials, regulatory preparedness, equality and justice in access to new technologies, better public debates, and attention to environment and sustainability issues, and many more. If you have the white papers open, maybe we can put some links to them in the YouTube chat. This is on page 13. And GoNano makes this one recommendation. We make several in this white paper, but the one that we focus on now here today is the recommendation to create a culture, to strengthen a culture of co-creation. And the question is, what role policymakers or others have to play in facilitating a change in the research and innovation system so that it supports actors who would actually like to be working in a more co-creative fashion and work with others outside of their own disciplinary background or expertise. This point is a crucial one, and it's also a difficult one, because in many areas, this ambition or this idea of engaging more and engaging in more dialogue and co-creating can also be that it's actually developing together with aspirations to do it. Okay. The second question today is one that we addressed to Anna Maria Rincon and Andrew Kope. And their opening question is taken from the GoNano white paper 1 on responsiveness in practice, aligning nanotechnologies with societal needs and values. Now, in that Go white paper, we argue that our experience really suggests that these co-creative processes, they have potential, but yes, as I mentioned, they need to address interests and motivations of all the participants. They need to happen over a large spans of time, because mutual learning really needs to be nurtured and given space. And also there's this need to really work to try to find the connection points where abstract values can be translated and connected to action. But once being successful in this, co-creation can really enhance opportunities to act on societal input. And boiled down to a recommendation, we recommended or said that there is really a need to nurture spaces for mutual benefit. So for where actors can meet and explore how and when they can work together to all achieve a mutual beneficial outcome. The question that we asked is how how do we nurture these opportunities for mutual benefit? So our experience really suggests that there's really a chance when technologies are not so far developed, so decisions can still be changed and turned around to do something and to align these research processes or ideas with societal needs and values. And we have presented in the GoNano-project a process that is taking time over a longer period, so it's a bit time and resource intensive. But how can we and how should we more systematically perhaps nurture these spaces of co-creation between actors with different kinds of expertise and also with citizens? So that is the second question. Okay, finally, the third question is addressed to Lucy and Pipin. And their opening question is taken from the GoNano White Paper 3 on the importance of gender and diversity in nanotechnology research and innovation. So, as I said, in GoNano, we worked with these topics of gender and diversity as both as topics for improving research and innovation processes, but also for improving future visions of innovation and technologies. And one of the recommendations that we made was to challenge implicit assumptions about gender and about diversity in future planning and future visions of nanotechnologies. And then the question that we asked our panel participants was what role an actor such as, for example, industry has in addressing stereotyping and implicit discrimination and gender issues in its innovation processes and products. We suggest that at least some reflection can be created in a co-creation process where you bring together stakeholders with different backgrounds. In the GoNano-project, we also suggested a tool for doing this. We work with scenarios that try to place visions of future nanotechnologies in everyday life situations of citizens and try to show what happens when these visions are made concrete and made to work in everyday life context of citizens, and how some unintentional effects could occur. Okay, that was it for me. And now I would very much like to ask the panelists to reflect and respond, and also to introduce themselves in the next round. And we will do this starting with the first set, Nicolas Delianakis and Wim Sinke. And so the panelists have been asked by us to take 3 minutes, but we won't be too strict, I think. But to start off, at least with not taking too long, to just say a few words about themselves and give their first initial response to these questions. So Nicolas, please, you begin. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Good afternoon. So I have been asked to look at the question of how to create a culture of co-creation. I have worked mostly on the technology side of research and innovation. I've been in the Commission for 21 years, first in Marie Curie, and most of the time after that in industry programs, including in nanotechnology. So this is very much an area that has grown over the years. In nanotechnology, it was always important because, of course, there was the question of risks and benefits. So a lot of the initial work was done there, and it has pointed the way to generalizing, to how we can generalize the concept. More recently, Horizon Europe, the new framework program that is going to start in 2021, is explicitly about co-creation and about reflecting the values and needs of society in all its activities. So co-creation is something that has grown a lot. both inside the Commission, where even that is not straightforward. Some of you may be surprised to hear. So that has come a long way, but even more importantly, with the widest possible set of stakeholders. Of course, we have created many tools. We have started using many tools to do that. The R&I days, surveys, dedicated projects, the societal elements in more mainstream projects. But all this work, I would say, still it has produced already very good results in terms of engagement and also in terms of impact. But it is, I think, still work in its infancy. And indeed, the recommendations in that part of the report are very useful and very pertinent. Indeed, there is not much of it, not much co-creation at present. Indeed, it has to be generalized. But of course, we cannot do this everywhere, both for logistic reasons and for technical reasons, because not all projects can accommodate this in practice, but it is something with a lot of potential. And indeed, all of us are responsible for that. We, as policy makers or funders, need to bring people together. And, but of course, people have to come together. So I think my 3 minutes are up. And I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Nicholas, for this first take on your challenge. Now I would like to ask Wim Sinke to do the same.
Yes, okay. Thank you, Lisa. Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me to give a short introduction here. I have been involved in research for 40 years now, all my life in solar energy, starting in basic research and then broadening it to applied research, technology development, and the last 10 years also program development and policy aspect. So I've have at least a taste of different aspects of research and the research environment. When reading the policy papers or the white papers, I recognize a lot. But I think some of the barriers towards making co-creation a standard and logical part of the whole research and innovation process with all the stakeholders involved is still not addressed to the extent that it should be. Researchers in nanotechnology, they're largely exact scientists, and in simple terms, they need to be convinced in order to get them in a certain direction. So I think that the carrot, so to speak, in the process needs to be used much more strongly than it has been before moving to the stick, if you like, that is related to the rewards or the acknowledgements that are given for a certain behavior or for certain steps. When looking at my colleagues within my own institute, but also much broader in the Netherlands and in Europe, I see that the change that is needed and that we are discussing here needs to be understood much better by people in exact sciences than it is right now. And it should be described more clearly in what it is exactly about and what it can bring to researchers and their results for society and for economy in general. Because it may be trivial, but many people have for good reasons, difficulties to imagine what it will bring to them and why this would be a natural step. I see no general lack of interest or willingness to move in that direction, but people need to be convinced in simple terms. And that is a good habit for scientists in general, I think. then there is, of course, a big gap. And I've also seen that in the different meetings that we had about the project, reading the white papers and all the material, there is a big gap in jargon and in the, let's say, the environment or the culture in the different parts of science, and especially between exact sciences on the one hand and social economics or psychology or economy or legal aspects on the other hand. So they need to be brought together, and that the gap needs to be closed for people to understand each other much better. I think that is still a lot of work to be done in that respect. And then finally, there is a huge lack of good examples, convincing, inspiring examples of co-creation in fields that researchers may connect to. You may give successful examples, but they're quite far away from the research field that people are in. And so for people to imagine what it takes and what it brings, I think we desperately need much more good examples, best practices, if you like. And then the process will sell itself to a large extent rather than enforced by funding organizations or research managers. And I think time is over. I can give you a few examples of the national science agenda that we have developed a few years ago, which was all about co-creation, and the do's and don'ts that we concluded from that. But let's keep that for the discussion.
Okay, thank you very much, Wim. So I would like to just encourage everyone, please, to ask your questions in the chat. Also, as you know, our panelists here are presenting, because we will collect up on your questions after the presentations. Okay, so next I would like to ask the next set of speakers, which is Anna Maria and Andrew Cope, sorry, to give us their first introduction and reaction to the challenge that they were presented with. Anna Maria, you go first.
Thank you. So thank you very much for giving the opportunity to be here today with all of you. So yes, my name is Anna Rincon and I work from the European Food Safety Authority. And probably you are wondering a little bit what does EFSA do? So yes, EFSA provides independent scientific advice and support to the rich managers and policymakers in the areas of food and feed safety. So this means when a product being authorized as a food additive or food supplements, this will depend on the scientific advice provided by EFSA. But EFSA also provides independent risk communication and really very important, promote scientific cooperation with universities and research centers. And nanotechnology is one of the relevant areas of work in EFSA. In 2018, we published a guidance when we indicated in this guidance what kind of data is needed when we evaluate the substance that are considered nanomaterials or engineered nanomaterials. But our work didn't finish there. So now we are working in a new EFSA guidance in which is indicated, we need to go to the previous one, so a new guidance that is indicated what kind of data is needed to decide it is that we call conventional risk assessment need to be complementary with nanospecific considerations. So these kind of documents are considering the latest advance in science and technology, and it's a document that was published for public consultation during the summer, so giving the opportunity to any European citizen to provide comments, and now we are finalizing these documents considering all those comments that we receive. So this is a way to cooperate and collaborate with universities, research centers, and in principle with any citizen that will be interested in this area. So because risk assessment is really a process that is in continuous adaptation with the new scientific evidence in research and innovation. And finally, you asked me to give my views on how we can nutrient opportunities of mutual benefit. So I think we need to think first that the areas of research change depending of the priorities given for the supporters of the funding. So I think all of us, we know that to get a research grant, your purpose and goals of the project need to meet one of the priorities that are indicated by the founding organization. So if we want to really consider the societal need, we need to find a way how we listen what the society think and to consider that when we are preparing those foundings programs. On following this approach is that EFSA, for example, has committed to start building a well-defined social function that can be considered when planning long-term strategies. So yes, we need to listen the society and especially to consider them when their views and their needed and their concern when we are establishing these foundings programs, because it's the only way to consider what the society wants during the research programs. So thank you again for joining today, and I am happy here to respond to any questions that you will have.
Thank you very much, Anna Maria, for this reaction and introduction. Now I would like to ask Andrew Kope to also briefly introduce and react to this challenge.
Okay, thank you, and good afternoon to you all. Andre, yes, is my name. Andrew, I've been called Andrew in US and so on. It's very refreshing to hear again that call. But indeed, I work for the European Commission in DG Environment as a policy officer, and basically on chemicals in general, as well as very specifically on nanomaterials. So I do have quite now some extensive experience in terms of how we have tried to gather the experiences and translate them also in policy responses from a more generic regulatory review work that we've done in 2012 up to the recent changes of the technical annexes of the chemicals regulation and so on. And as I've been working on this as a policy officer, and before I worked also in the Environment Agency, and before that I worked in academia. What I want to stress about that is that when I worked in academia, I was much too lower in the food chain. I was more of a lab rat closed in a system to perform a task rather than try to influence the innovation pathways. But through all my career also, I have not really engaged as much, either working in industry or maybe in some other area than policy work and policy development. And within this area, we always had a concept of basically engaging with the stakeholders, understanding what our role and what the needs are, and of course respond to that appropriately. And that's the way how I was trying also to read, and I read with interest because it's a well structured and clearly written documentation that you have provided during this the work of GoNano on the aspect of the co-creation, because I cannot say I have personal experience engaging in it apart from the recent stressed examples which Nicolas mentioned, that we are doing co-creation in-house as well in terms of developing the EU, let's say also the EU, the Horizon Europe programs. Yeah, my experiences to that extent are a bit limited, but on the other hand, I have always considered that we are co-creating within a society particular issues, like, for example, through regulation, trying to address the societal needs in the particular area and reflecting what the society might actually be considering to be the status or the way of how this needs to be regulated. And that's maybe my first message in the whole debate, is that we shouldn't somehow split too much our our roles and try to mathematize how the system should work. The researchers, the innovators, they are part of society, and there is expectation even before any co-creation defined process you have that they would actually be reflecting on those roles that they have in a society, and that whatever they are innovating is actually of certain societal benefit. I have heard with interest what Wim was saying about the carrots and sticks and so on. But on the other hand, we are all part of that society, and we should be considering, for example, in the innovation that you are, when you're innovating something, you shouldn't wait until you are being told by some other stakeholder representing society that you might have issues with sustainability or with, I don't know, with environmental impact. That is something that you should nurture as part of your innovation process already internally, even in your own head, rather than just a part of a certain systemic process. Of course, we need to support those innovators in doing that, and that you can do by having certain tools, systems like, for example, sustainability and safety by design guidance and tools, which would help them also do that by themselves. This is also stressed in the chemical strategy for sustainability because it's a generic issue. It's not a nano-specific issue at all. So that's my first point. The second would also say that what's important is also, again, in order to nurture this co-creation and ability to help the co-creation that really helps the society move forward in all these aspects, is that even outside of the co-creation process itself, we ensure that there is a transparency and ability to build knowledge for all the stakeholders, including citizens and so on. So there's a role for all the stakeholders in that respect, especially the industry, considering also innovating some products or having innovative products already being put on the market, that information is already there. And the people can actually make then informed considerations, even of their own particular domain of interest, but at least even that needs to be informed to some extent with what is actually happening. They cannot just, otherwise we stay on the generic aspects of this should be sustainable, which was mentioned actually in a white paper. And we might have, and then we, as a last point, when we enter into the systemic tools of the co-creation, you must always be wary of that you might have information imbalance. Some people are more knowledgeable than others, again, and so on. That has been again stressed in the white papers. Might have issues with representativeness. Is this a societal interest? Really, if you have a societal, a person representing society or citizens there, or are these just some regular people having some information but not all? So everyone should be aware that there might be systemic ways of ensuring that the societal interest is being properly identified, and we have processes for that. You cannot just rely on the individual event in order to identify that. So also the votings in some respects sometimes are a bit misleading, I would say, in these events. But of course, last, which is it's obvious, is of course if you engage in this, and I certainly support that we have this the co-creation tools more systemically applied. But when you apply them, be sure that you are actually prepared for that. And for that you can use the best practices, and the GoNano is perfect for developing those and the guidance and so on. But we expect it to be prepared, not to make it as an exercise in terms to satisfy some tick mark somewhere. And that's all from me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and Dry. Apologies for that, for this presentation. Very interesting. Now, before we go into the discussion, I would like to turn to the last challenge and the last set of panelists. And I would like to ask Lucy to go first. Oh, well, no, sorry, and Pepin to go first. Sorry. for that.
Okay. Thank you very much. So the question that we were asked to answer deals with the role of industry in addressing stereotyping, implicit discrimination, and gender issues in innovation processes. And for me, it's a bit far from our focus, since in DG Research and Innovation, it's really research and let's say the starting steps. Let's say industry is not our core target, but it did bring interesting reflection to mind. And of course, we are doing activities to have an inclusive ecosystem for gender equality in research and innovation. And just to say where I speak from is from the gender sector, which is in DG Research and Innovation and at the Commission, and in charge of coordinating and developing the gender equality policies at EU level in research and innovation, and also coordinating the best integration of these questions into policies and programs throughout the research and innovation family, I would say. So our core focus have really been until now, let's say research organization, research performing and research funding organization. And but this is changing in the next framework program, Horizon Europe. Nicolas already talked about the increased co-creation processes that have been put into place and higher attention to citizens. And it's also the case for gender, which is a cross-cutting priority in the program. And this means that it should be integrated in the contents in the different fields that are funded under Horizon Europe. This will become a norm, unless really it's not relevant for the topic at stake, but there's going to be a very much stronger integration, plus all applying organization. And for now, it's public bodies, research organizations, and higher education institution will be required to have a gender equality plan in place to have access to funding under Horizon Europe. So this is a big step. It's not yet requested from the private sector, but there are specific activities that will be funded under the European Innovation Council, where there's really a strong impetus to increase the number of women innovators, because this remains really low, particularly low in nanotech, too, maybe not bio nanotech, but it's really a strong focus that with some activities that will be developed there through the accelerator instrument, really for SMEs and startups. Already there are like 2 stages to get funding, and you get invited to an interview, and there is now a quota for interviews where at least 25 of the interviewees should be women. So this is one part of the aspects, but of course we want to also develop the contents, the actual innovation that is developed, that it does take into account gender and diversity issues. But I can also say that we've been developing the interface between research and innovation around gender, around debunking gender stereotype for a while, and also the interface with education. We had a project called Hypatia, like the famous mathematician from the antiquity, that really was about developing a toolkit of activities on science and debunking gender stereotypes, and that really worked with classrooms, research organization, and companies. And now, very soon, we will be launching a new project to bridge actually the gender gap and to foster more women innovators that will be focused on living labs really teaching, but also really concrete activities and a direct link with the textile industry. So this will be a very concrete implementation of such co-creation, opening also to the local communities, local businesses and citizens. And we want to do this even more with industries under Horizon Europe. So really create innovation ecosystems that do integrate a gender dimension and an intersectional dimension. So looking at intersections between gender and other social categories and grounds for discrimination, such as ethnicity, disability, age, sexual orientation. So developing gender responsive, inclusive and gender responsive innovation is one we aim for.
Okay, thank you very much, Anne, for this response and introduction. Now I would like to ask our final panelist, Lucy, to also give her a brief introduction and response.
Hello, I thank you to invite to this section and to participation of this part of the interesting discussion. I would like to introduce myself. My name is Lucia Vysloužilova. I know my surname is a little bit hard for pronunciation, but Lucy is okay. And I am a quality manager at nanotechnology company Nanopharma. It's a company in Czech Republic, and we are very small company. We have only eight employees, and almost employees in our company are women. So maybe it will be into the discussion later. And I'm also an international project manager at Cluster Nanoprogress. I graduated from Technical University of Liberec with a degree from nonwovens and nanofibers. So I have some experiences from research and from development from universities field, from academic field. And also I have experiences as a research R&D person from our R&D team at Nanopharma company. And I have also experience in quality of the process and of the product. In our company, we developed the very first nanofibrous smart sheet mask, as you can see in the picture on my slide. The brand of this smart nanofibrous mask is Fiber Care. So we are interested in nanotechnology in cosmetics, in pharmacy, in medicine, but also in some industry areas are filtration and so on. I participated in European projects, or I am participating because they are projects they are running at the moment. And they are projects of Horizon 2020, Nemozin, VIDA, and new one is GSSC project. It's about smart small cities. And yeah, I think that's it to introduce of myself. And now I would like to discuss your question in this part. This question was about gender issues, about discrimination, and about stereotyping in innovation process. And I would like to say, in my opinion, in this area, what are nanotechnology and advanced materials, I think in these days, they are pretty popular areas of focus of interest. And I think in these innovation processes and in these new materials, I don't see some differences between inputs from men or women, and I think in this field of new technology, advanced materials, nanotechnology, nanoparticles, nanomaterials, there are a lot of women. I think, or I can say, in our company in Nanopharma, we started around 11 years ago, and we were a company with only women. We had only women in our company, and people called us Amazons of nanotechnologies. So I see women, same like men, are able to find their place in these innovative processes, in this innovation of the products. And I think especially in these difficult days caused by COVID, what we have here now, people see that nanotechnology and nanomaterials and new innovative products are more popular than some years ago. And I think some years ago, people were a little bit, or maybe a lot of scared about the word nano. People when heard nanotechnology, nanoparticles, or nanofibers, they thought it's something scary for them because it's too small and they don't know what it happens. But I think in these days, and maybe maybe now in this difficult COVID time, people are more familiar with these products, with these nano products, smart products, and other innovative products. And I think this field of innovation is more open, not only to men, women, and other genders. I think it's more open even to people from different, I don't know, different countries, from different areas, because it's more familiar to all people. So in my opinion, I don't see very problem with discrimination or with gender issues in this area. Maybe some problem here could be in religion, because some religion has problem with some testing of new materials in medicine, especially materials going into human body, or with some smart materials like smart patch, nano patch, or something like that. So maybe the question is, what about religion, and how we could be able to say people that nanotechnology, nanofibers, and nanoparticles are safety for them. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucy, for ending the first round of the policy panel in this very interesting, with this very complex and interesting challenge and question to us. Okay, so I wanted to start now the discussion round by looking at what we have come in the Slido Q&A. While I have a look at the Slido Q&A, I also wanted to ask the panel participants to, if you haven't done it already, to of course reflect and react and ask, prepare a few questions also for each other. But I'm sure that after this, really, I was writing these very interesting first reactions, that you all have a lot to say to each other. I have to inform that my chat moderator is missing in action due to a power outage in the whole region where he lives. So please excuse me, but I have to navigate in Slido myself and just have a look at the questions that are coming in there. The first one that I can see is a question that's been upvoted by two at least. It's not a question as much as appreciation on the focus of gender and diversity. Then the second question in the Slido chat is for Wim. It's a question from Andrea, and he asks, Wim, you said we need to convince researchers, but sometimes benefits are intangible or long-term and therefore not straightforward to explain. Do you have any comments or ideas on this?
Yes, I think that's an excellent question. I think that if benefits are not tangible or long-term, that does not mean that they cannot be explained. I would turn it around. If you cannot explain the benefits, even in the long term or indirectly, then you would not be able to convince anyone to move in that direction voluntarily, so to say. So this relates a little bit to the point that I made about jargon. So I think it's worthwhile to spend effort on trying to formulate the benefits for society or for environment, or in whatever terms you would like to put them, to formulate them in such a way that they become, if not tangible, that they become understandable and can be used as an argument for people to motivate themselves and to move in that direction. In my experience, people are very willing to work along those lines because they are part of society. I think Nicholas mentioned that. It's not all about frameworks and regulations, but it's also about researchers being simply members of society and perhaps very aware members, because they tend to read newspapers and developments in the world very carefully and closely. So I think it's not difficult to connect to them or to their world, but you need to be able to explain what you would like to achieve. Otherwise, they will start explaining it to themselves, and that may be something different. And I see that in some program or tender formulations that we've seen on a national level and EU level, big steps have been made forwards to include those aspects of socioeconomics or psychology or whatever dimensions you choose. But the researchers in the field who have to respond to that with their proposals and their projects have difficulties to translate what they can do to what is asked, and that gap has not been bridged as far as I can see yet.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Wim, for that reply. I see that Nicholas Delianakis has his hand up.
Yes, and another point about this question is that much of the research these days is not all that long-term. In the program I work on in particular, we very often, more often than not, we have topics with a 5-year horizon. So that means that you need, if you ask the question, how are you going to capitalize on the results of the research, you are in effect asking how you're going to persuade people to buy it, to put it crudely. So that is by its own nature, it brings the engagement. So it's not quite as difficult in those cases. Not in every case like that, because of course, often enough, you just want to sell the technology to the next entity that will use it and not to people directly. But in general, it is a lot easier when the closer you are to the market, to society, and also just even more important to have this element of engagement. And then you need less of the carrot because it's obvious that you have to do it, or more obvious.
Okay, thank you. Wim, do you want to respond to that, or anyone else who wants to respond or add something to this question? Okay, then I have another question in the chat that has come up, and this one is addressed to Andre. Andre, what is your experience, feeling on the motivation and interests of citizens in engagement in innovation and policy process? Is this a bottleneck in your view?
Well, first, I would partially split the question because, again, from my limited experience, maybe other participants in the panel can share more about the experiences in the innovation chain and so on, and engagement of citizens there. My experience in putting into the whole policy, being motivated to be involved in policy, I would always find that there is always a motivation to do that in a most generic sense, as people get engaged in policy, or specifically on the topics that also we were discussed, like chemicals or nanotechnology. We have a few experiences. Some of them are also listed in GoNano, where then the citizens' engagement was also challenged through the nano dialogue and so on. But of course, that's a systemic way of trying to also help them engage. Of course, they do it by themselves as well. We are always quite also busy to try to reply and to be transparent in what we do and to reply to any of those questions, either from individual citizens or from the representative from different NGOs and so on. And sometimes it goes quite to quite some intense levels, I would say, when also then the citizens very motivated get organized, and there sometimes the question becomes, do they have enough knowledge in order to properly channel what their issues are, and we find that in some cases that is then not as effective. Though they are motivated, as the question was explicitly put forward, they're motivated. The whole engagement experience at the end might not be so satisfying either for them or for us. Either they are too, yeah. It's not the whole picture that we are addressing together then with them, and they that is usually then not satisfying. Or if the solutions for those engagement by those how to say organizations that channel that citizens' interest and so on is actually becoming quite narrow and not so inclusive of finding solutions, but they have solutions by themselves. And that included experiences explicitly with trying to stop nano, by default. And that had to, in large extent, in my view, had to do as well with us not being able to communicate in advance and generally also to the public generally, all the issues surrounding the nanomaterials and the information we have on the safety of those that are actually being used and so on. So and those created those responses which were not so effective. We have, but motivations can be, and especially when organized, can be extreme. We have cases more in chemicals in general. For example, when it comes to animal welfare and testing, it is quite possible to get 500,000 of citizens' requests within a few weeks on a particular issue that these NGOs had considered to be relevant, to be trying to motivate those their constituents, and they respond. So they're certainly motivated.
Okay, Thank you very much for trying to answer this question. And there's quite a lot of activity right now in the Q&A. So I wanted to try to get to all of them. But before I get to the questions that are addressed to all of you, there's one question here that is addressed specifically to you, Lucy. And that question is, was co-creation, and then particularly with consumers, was it used during the development of the nanofiber smart sheet mask?
Excuse me, one more.
So the question is if co-creation, particularly with consumers, if you use that during the development of the nanofiber smart sheet mask.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there were a lot of cooperation with us and us as R&D team and our marketing team and so on with consumers, because there were very important to have their opinion on our mask, because it's absolutely new product. The people don't know how to use nanofiber, they don't know what they could see and what is their expectation of this mask, because they know some fibers product, and then they know it's some sheet of the fibers, and okay, then they know what to do with this material. But now we come with absolutely new product, and we have some nanofibers materials with some ingredients inside fibers, and it's absolutely new to have some ingredients inside fibers and not around. And now they put this mask on her or him face, and now they don't know what expected, and nanofibers are going away because they are soft, and it was very surprising for customers. So we had a lot of discussion with customers, with cosmetic people from cosmetic area, because we are not from cosmetic area. We are material engineers, we are physicists, chemists, and people from nanotechnology and from research. And now we had to very intensively communicate with our customers, with cosmetic salons, with dermatologists, and so on, to be able to prepare almost perfect product for them, prepare in a way people could be very familiar with this product, and people should enjoy this process, this application, and relax, and active ingredients going into their face and so on. So it was very intensive communication.
Okay, thank you very much for giving us that insight into your process. So we have about 5 minutes left, I think, for the discussion session of this roundtable before I want to also manage to visit the drawing of Søren before we end the panel. But there's one overarching perhaps question in the chat that I would like to ask all of the panelists to just respond to, and then also while responding to that, add any additional remarks that you have, anything that you haven't gotten out yet in your comments. So the overarching question that I would like to ask all of you now to respond to is, how do you envision the future of co-creation in nanotechnologies? And also thanks for a great session from the participants. So would you like to go first, Andre?
I've been speaking a lot, so maybe let's
okay, Anna
give
Maria.
someone else.
I raised my hand, but
yes, sorry, yes.
Yeah. Well, I think there is not such a thing as the future of co-creation in nanotechnology, but the co-creation in science or science and technology that has big influences on our lives. If it's just nanotechnology, then it won't work. It needs to be part of the practice of science, of research and innovation. And if I would have to summarize the future of it, then I would say it will become increasingly a natural part of the research and innovation practice rather than something that has to be added to it. As I mentioned in my short introduction, we have experience with the development of the National Research Agenda or Science Agenda in the Netherlands, where this is built in from the very start. And we see when you do that, and this relates to all parts of science, not just science and technology. If you do that, then you start seeing a change in the research ecosystem as a whole, which takes time, but which is necessary to get to a new regime, if you like, to a new paradigm, whatever you call it. But it needs to be internalized into the research practice, also on the side of the researchers and the research organization. And I think that is the future. So integration of it rather than having, let's say, an addition to an ongoing practice.
Thank you very much, Wim. Anna Maria, perhaps as the next.
Yes, I will say the same that Wim. So it's not just focused on nanotechnologies, it will be general for any science and for research in science. So for me, I think that I mentioned before, I think probably with the new technology that we have, it's really important to get the feedback for the society. And this is principal responsibility of the organization who are preparing these funding programs, because it's the ones that will give indications in which areas of the research will be for the following years. Because at the end, research need to find a funding, and for the reason they need to a little bit to accommodate their projects to the priorities that are given. So I think it's really important to find ways in a proper way, because sometimes the new technology can be also a little bit confused. So, but it's important to find a correct way how to listen the society. And I think, yes, new technologies are there, and we need to use them more often to get the feedback from the society. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And you have time to respond before you have to leave? Oh, you're muted.
Are you talking to me? Yes, well, I'll just, to add to what has already been said, well, pay attention to gender and diversity. You stated quite well in your recommendation and your report, your white paper. But yes, it's both in the participation, in the users you take on board, and also in really the contents, what you are designing, who it will benefit to. These aspects have to be taken into account and really open to intersectionality. Gender is super important, but opening to intersectionality. And just an hour ago, the new strategy of the Commission on LGBTIQ, so gender identity and sexual orientation, has just been adopted. So, and really we're in that process, and it's true for nanotech, and it's true for, and what I didn't say is that I come from nanotechnology. I was a researcher in nanotech for about 15 years before getting interested into gender equality in research. So yes, I mean, you have some great findings and recommendation, and we need to delve into implementing this.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your participation today. And Nicholas, would you like to go next?
Yes, thank you. Indeed, it goes beyond nano. As it happens in our own program now, we no longer do those topics in nano that are directly relevant to gender because we don't do nanomedicine. Of course, you have it there. But we do have nano safety, and there, of course, it is important. But there are many other areas as well, as Wim said, and I just like, as everything else has been said, just like to give some examples about these intersectional issues that are in so many places. One is automation and the role of workers. The other one is the use of artificial intelligence, removing bias from artificial intelligence. Even this morning, I was working on a draft topic on this very issue. Another one is whenever societal acceptance is involved, for example, when we think about the circular economy, where we want people to adopt it, then of course inclusiveness automatically comes in, not only gender, but all aspects of inclusiveness. So there are countless examples that go beyond nano, and some of which we are actively exploring. And finally, on the general question, where do we go from here? The part of the answer is, of course, it can only improve because because we are at this process is still at its infancy. So in a way, it is good news because there are many good ideas out there ready to be very matured, ready to be exploited. So I, for one, am very excited about that. Yes, we haven't got much, but there's so many opportunities that we know how to pursue now.
Yes. Thank you very much for this perspective, Nicholas. And I want to make it also to give Lucy and Andre a chance to comment. Lucy?
Yeah, I think a lot of things were saying now, and I think more important is to connect all of these spheres to connection between academia, between company. Maybe it a little bit happened because a lot of universities has some special centers for research, and these centers are some part between some connection between universities and companies, and they are of course communication. There are of course important communication with some legacy, with some policy. And so on, and with the European Commission, because it's a global system, and of course the end part of all of this are customers. So I think all of these parts could be connected, and I think we should focus on genders. We should focus on technologies, on new application, and I think it was a very good point to speak and to focus on circular economy, because, and I agree with, I think Nicholas, did you say about circular economy, and I think it's very important topic too. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Lucy, for this finishing remark. Andrew.
Yeah, very briefly, I agree with all the colleagues said. I think Wim already launched quite well and stressed this importance on the internalizing by the researchers. I don't have deep insight myself, but I can imagine that it might not be a completely straightforward process. And I would just put two remarks here. One would be that on one hand, I would think that that having tools like guidance, best practices, and new technologies, as was mentioned, as also a way of supporting that that co-creation always has benefits. But as also the white paper had identified, it is often quite resource intensive if you want to go to the actual level then where this added values start coming out, and that is always a warning sign. One must ensure that that added value is there, and that the resource price is not prohibitive. So it's a difficult balance. So I would say yes, it can only go forward, like Nicolas said, but we should be wary of not introducing something not as effectively as it could be. So that there must always be that kind of dimension, considering whether you are actually really getting out what you're investing in, because we must acknowledge that we're all part of society and we're creating that kind of information all the time. Like it was mentioned, a circular economy, or we have now our chemical strategy for sustainability. These were actually quite deep insights, can create quite deep, are there as already quite deep insights into the societal needs and expectations. Mm-hmm. And one should just try to use and apply or reuse those insights already, rather than, for example, re-asking it in a slightly smaller circle.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Andrea, and thank you very much to all of you participants in the policy panel now, and also to our audience for asking all of these very interesting questions. I think what we take with us as a project is really somehow increased emphasis on our point on mutual learning, because there's a lot of potential and a lot of willingness, but there's also a great need. I hear from also what you are saying, to interact more and to spend more time together, and to really get to know both what are the good examples, what are the good approaches, and also to develop more of a common language. So this was really a very interesting session, and we are desperately over time. So I would like to thank you all. I think we won't make it to have a look at the drawing right now, but thank you very much to the panel participants. And we now have a 5-minute break before we transition into the next session, where we will hear from a number of other projects who have also worked with societal engagement in each their own way, what their experiences have been, and what their perspectives are on the future. Thank you very much, everyone, and see you in 5 minutes. Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Okay, welcome back, everyone. So I hope you had a nice little short break, and now we are ready with our second session of the day. This panel is called Working with Societal Engagement and Co-Creation in Horizon 2020 projects and beyond. So I wanted to, as always, remind you to please ask your questions in the Slido Q&A throughout the whole session. Don't wait until the end, but just add them as they pop into your heads. Also, remind you that after this session, we're hosting an informal networking event. So please do stay and enjoy this the chance to connect more informally with us and hopefully also with the speakers who have been able to stay. Right. As I mentioned in the beginning of today, the host of this session is Harald Trone-Holst from Oslo Metropolitan University. And Harald will be your guide through this session, and he will introduce everyone. And so therefore, I would like to now hand over the mic and camera to Harald, and I wish you all a very good session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa, and job well done so far. So let's hope I can carry this stick further on. So welcome to this second part of session 3. I will now share my screen. Hopefully. Well. You see it? Can you see the slides?
Hi, Harald. Yes. You have to click presentation mode in the corner, the right-hand corner.
Okay, sorry. Here? Okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Sorry for that mishap. I think we have seen today we are talking about very complicated technological solutions, nanotechnology, but we see also that our chat-made moderator, there's been a power outage in his area, so he's out of business. So it's also seen some of the vulnerabilities of new technologies. Anyhow, so this is the name of the session today. We have now dwelled with the findings of GoNano over the sessions of this final conference so far. Now we will invite other projects in to share their experiences. Okay. So, oh, sorry, skip that one. Well, again, we show the limitations of new technologies. So in the GoNano-project, as we have mentioned, we have investigated and experimented with how responsiveness of innovation processes can be improved through societal engagement and co-creation. Of course, we often mention RI in this context, but we should emphasize that the RI concept is much broader than co-creation, and that RI encompasses much more. But anyhow, over these sessions, we have seen that we have found interesting things in our projects and some dilemmas, I think, as well. But so have other Horizon 2020 projects. So today we will hear from some of those projects: the ROI Configure, the Consider project, the SysCode, and the New Horizon. So what should be the goals or aims of societal engagement? Which is, of course, the key question. Some might say it is to engage citizen consumers in science and technology, to increase their knowledge and also their acceptance of new and emerging technologies and technological solutions. And furthering on that thought, we do live in a society where technologies have permeated our everyday lives, and we have and we will need in the future to develop and implement new technological solutions. However, we would argue that in the GoNano-project, we have had a more of a dialogical approach. So how can we arrange a dialogue between citizen consumers and professional stakeholders in this enduring effort to align innovation processes or the outcome of innovation processes with societal values? So we will now hear from our speakers, and we have asked them to address the following questions. I don't think they find time to maybe answer all of them, but anyhow, what can we learn about societal engagement from your project? What is the state of the art of societal engagement in your opinion? What new developments, perspectives, and questions are important going forward? And how and in what ways should societal engagement be addressed in upcoming calls, be it in Horizon Europe or other contexts? So without further ado, I will then introduce the presenters. And our first presenter is Dr. Kutuma Wakunuba. She's an associate professor within the Center of Computing and Social Responsibility at the De Montfort University in Leicester in the United Kingdom. Her PhD was in Information Communication Technologies for Development and Gender. Her research interest is in understanding how new and emerging technologies impact society, both in the developed and in the developing world. Today, here, she will share some insights and perspectives on societal engagement from the Consider project. Dear Dr. Wakunuba, dear Kutuma, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Harald. Let me just see about sharing my screen. Is it visible? Can you see my screen? Okay, brilliant. Yes. All right, so once again, thank you very much for your wonderful introduction. But also let me thank you for organizing this very interesting and important session today. And I would also like to extend my thanks to your fellow organizers of the session. I have captioned my presentation as responsible engagement and co-creation. And this is for the simple reason that a societal engagement and co-creation in any projects that are current and also that are upcoming should not be just about box ticking, you know, which is what sometimes happens in these projects. So my point is that the projects should be about meaningful engagement and co-creation. They should be about inclusion of an array of societal actors. And I take my cue from the Consider project, which you already introduced. This project, which stood for or stands for Civil Society Organizations in Designing Research Governance, was an FP7 Science in Society research project. And this was between 2012 and 2015. It had 8 partners. But I think it's a very important project because it really showcased the importance of engagement in funded projects. It also showcased the difficulties that other societal actors, apart from the usual traditional, say, academic researchers, face when it comes to effective engagement or co-creation in research-funded projects. And so the aims of the Consider project really were to understand the role of civil society organizations in research. Apart from that, we also wanted to understand the barriers that were there that hindered the effective participation. And at the same time, what the enablers could be that could allow for the effective engagement in research projects. So what we did then was to develop guidelines at the end of the day, to develop guidelines for civil society organizations themselves, but also for policymakers, for funders, for researchers, and for evaluators. The guidelines were really intended for these groups because they're the main ones that normally are engaged or supposed to engage in research. And so we felt that specific tailor-made guidelines were necessary for these particular groups, and not just to have a general sort of guidelines for that, you know, would potentially be considered to fit everyone. So we needed to ensure that these were specific to the different stakeholders. So the Consider project really helped us to understand what responsible engagement and co-creation in projects might look like or should look like. And one of the things that we found was that it was about meaningful inclusion, as I've alluded to earlier at the top of my presentation. It is really also about being responsive to the different needs of the societal actors, these being whether they're researchers, seasoned researchers, whether they're civil society organizations, whether they are funders, evaluators, or policymakers, or indeed other citizens, societal citizens. And also it's really about being reflective of those particular needs, or indeed how the different stakeholders might understand research, or how they might be able to receive research or indeed participate. And with that, what we realized was that there was then the legitimization, there was a possibility that research could be legitimized for different societal actors, and also the fact that it was easier to have societal buy-in into the research, because oftentimes what happens is that buy-in is quite difficult if there are only a few actors that are actively participating in research. So because the other ones that are not necessarily there will not understand and will therefore not be convinced about the importance of the research or the innovation that other people have produced, because they have not had input in that research. And so the other aspect of responsible engagement and co-creation was that it helps to create much needed trust in research, so much so that it becomes easier for it to filter down to other societal actors. And I think we have all come across in recent times debates around how some quarters of society no longer want to engage or to trust in any scientific evidence, or question why they should really trust what they are told. And I think this is because they haven't necessarily been involved, and they haven't necessarily been able to contribute to any processes that have taken place at any given time in research. Mainly what has happened is that mostly it's academics, it's scholars that have been working in their silos and to produce research outcomes that then are supposed to be taken up by society. I mean, things around innovation, we have a lot of technology that changes all the time. And most of the time, it is a few cohorts that produce this research, set the research agenda, and then at the end of the day, the expectation is that it becomes mainstream and it becomes a lot easy. It becomes easy for other society actors to receive it. But I think there's been that push to say, no, hang on a minute, we have not necessarily contributed to this. We have not had a lot of buy-in, so why should we trust any such innovation that comes along? So, so inclusion, responsiveness, reflection, and being reflective of societal actors' needs, diverse societal actors' needs, then adds that much needed trust and that much needed valuing of contribution from the other actors. And so that is the sort of responsible engagement and co-creation in projects that ought to be there, and that's the Consider project kind of taught us as we researched around the project.
1 minute. You should try to.
Oh, yeah, okay. So basically, some of the barriers that were related to ineffective engagement really was to do with a lack of existing networks of cooperation. Most times the corporations are around the seasoned researchers, and so it becomes very difficult for civil society organizations or other stakeholders like citizens to be able to push past those barriers because they have not necessarily been engaged in research. And then also there's this element where science is seen as an authority, which of course is rightly so, it should be. But I think the issue then becomes when it's not accessible, particularly in terms of language. And I think one of the presenters earlier on discussed the aspect of jargon. And this is a big issue and a barrier for others to engage effectively in research. The other aspect really has to do with how scientific systems work and the incentives that are there. So for example, there's a lot of emphasis put on publishing, on presenting evidence, and this is something that is quite alien to, for example, civil society organizations. And that in itself can be quite difficult. Funding schemes as well are not always something that are very much easily accessible to civil society organizations because they are mainly volunteers. They do not necessarily have the much needed research support. And so it becomes important for, say, policymakers, for example, to clarify the objectives when it comes to encouraging effective engagement and co-creation participation. This is because obviously policymakers influence the direction of any research projects. There's need to create an environment that is conducive for not only seasoned academic researchers, but indeed for civil society organizations and other citizens. But then also there's this need to rethink what scientific excellence means. Should it be only about publishing, or should it also consider other ways of looking at knowledge? In addition, the research processes have to be simplified. There should be a recognition that there is a diverse nature of stakeholders that can effectively participate in research and to co-create outcomes that are suitable for society and that can be acceptable for other elements of society's actors. And then, of course, there's that element of collaboration over competition. There is a lot of competition, and this is something that is, that academics are used to, but it is not something that other societal actors are used to. So perhaps there's a need to weigh in and look at ways that can foster more collaboration rather than competition in that respect. And so aside from policymakers, I think funders, obviously, the very nature of having projects is that there is funding involved. And so they ought to be raising awareness of the issues to consider in engagement and co-creation. They should also allow the different stakeholders to help shape the research agenda, and not just to have them as a sort of figureheads that are just there to tick the boxes, if you like, as I've alluded to earlier. Funders also need to create funding structures that are sensitive to different stakeholders, and they also have to facilitate building connections between stakeholders like civil society organizations and other citizens, other than researchers or citizen researchers. There's also need to emphasize the importance of dissemination and impact beyond what is already emphasized in research elements or in research areas. But I think this has to go to other societal actors as well. And then also there's a need to ensure sensitivity to other stakeholders, including a CSO related aspect when it comes to evaluating research proposals. And I think I was very happy with what Anne indicated earlier about new ways of making sure that there's gender engagement. And I think this is the right way to move, so that whenever there is any calls, whenever there is evaluation of these particular projects, they should be able to check about who issues around who's engaged, who has set the research agenda, and how effective has this participation been. And so perspectives.
You have to close now.
Okay,
very soon.
Okay. So anyway, so lastly, I suppose is perspectives moving forward. So really, in essence, we have to start thinking about promoting research excellence that incorporates other ways of thinking that includes other societal members other than the more seasoned researchers, and that there's ways that we have to ensure that civil society is included in further development of transnational research agendas through, for example, the joint programming initiatives. I suppose other things, we might discuss later on.
Well, we can take that maybe in the roundtable.
Exactly.
Yes.
So yeah, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. This was really excellent. A lot of very interesting themes, both the meaningful inclusion, a very nice term, but also this emerging debate on what this scientific excellence really should be. So thank you so far, and I guess we will have a lot of questions to you, hopefully, and comments in the Q&A of the Slido. So now we'll turn to our next speaker. It's Carmen Fenolosa. She's a senior project manager at Excite. Excite is the European network of science centers, museums, and organizations that engage citizens with science. She holds a master's degree in cultural institution management and has an enticing and interesting background from the cultural and creative sector before she joined Excite. Today, she will talk about the lessons learned and share some insights and perspectives from the Syscode project. Dear Mrs. Fenolosa, dear Carmen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Harold. Thank you for the invitation and for the presentation. I hope you can now see my screen fully. No. Can you see it?
No.
No, okay. So I have a problem. If I don't share my screen, you might not be able to see it. Let's start by sharing my screen now.
Looks great.
Does it? Can you see full screen as well? Now. Okay, so thank you again for the invitation and for the welcome. I know I have 10 minutes. I will try to stick to the time and not speak too fast. I will start by giving you an overview of what we've been doing with in Syscode so far, and then I will get to the learnings and maybe tell you what I think personally about the next steps in terms of bringing co-creation to the next framework program. So in a nutshell, Syscode is a research project researching on co-creation and what are the barriers and drivers of co-creation in a number of ecosystems. And we are part, I mean, our consortium is partly composed by researchers and partly mainly composed by practitioners. And we're running both, we're doing both an analytical research, a part that is more analytical, and another part that is more related to real life experimentation and action-oriented research using a system of 10 co-creation labs. So what are these labs doing? Actually, these 10 labs are spread throughout Europe, and they are either fab labs, living labs, or science centers and science museums. And during 21 months, what they're doing is they're trying to solve a societal challenge that is linked to their local community. And for that, what they did is that at the proposal stage, they identified one problem they wanted to work with. And now that the project has started, or now that we are, I think, 21 months into this co-creation journey, they have been creating a network of local actors to work together to co-produce a solution. And for that, they're using a toolbox to guide the iterative process of understanding, ideating, prototyping, and verifying the work. And for that, they are using a number of design methodologies to actually build a prototype and try to bridge the gap there is between the ideation phase and the implementation phase, because I guess we understood, or we know that there is when we start to have problems in the co-creation. Well, we have problems in doing co-creation throughout the processes, but in that precise moment, I think there's a major problem. So we're trying to see how to bridge that gap. Otherwise, I think that's more or less what the labs are doing in Cisco. And I think, well, and this is what I'm going to be talking about today, their learnings of this 21-month journey. About the Cisco toolbox, I think I won't say much, just that it's a number of operational tools that we identified and that we thought would be useful for the labs and that they have used as a foundation for their work, but they have also added other tools that they had from their own practice. And if you're interested in knowing more about it, I would suggest that you go to our website, ciscodeproject.eu, and check out what this toolbox is all about. So that's it. I think I'm going to go to my learnings. I hope I still have some time to go through them, because we have quite a number. Personally, if I have to say what I've learned about this societal engagement and about Cisco, the project, is that researchers and practitioners are a bit like oil and water. They don't tend to mix very well. So it's always a challenge to work with both of them. And I think I sit more on the side of the practitioners, although our role was a bit special because we were one of the European networks involved in the project, and we were not actually implementing something. But still, it was quite challenging. But that would be like a learning for me. In the end, we've succeeded in creating a great team, and it's being very fulfilling. But it's been quite of a steep learning curve, I'd say. And then I think that our project has been impacted, as many others that are currently running, by the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think I could not be here today and at least say a few words about it, because it has also given us quite a number of learnings. To start with, at the beginning, I think we opted for the attitude of, okay, let's wait and see. These might just go away, and in autumn we will be able to run face-to-face workshops. But we quickly realized that COVID was here to stay, at least for a bit, and that we had to find some solutions. So we turned to the digital world, and I think one of the first learnings we got was to learn how to practically use a number of digital tools we had not been using so far. And also, we had to understand that these co-creation workshops, if you run them face-to-face is one thing, but if you try to translate that to online workshops, it really becomes very challenging. And you have to make a number of adaptations, and it requires time and more resources. And that, added to the stress that we were all having from the pandemic itself, was a lot already. And I have to say that for some of our labs, it was very difficult to try and translate this to online workshops, because their solution was very physical per se. One of them was, for instance, trying to regain ownership of the river by the citizenship. So it really meant that the citizens had to go to the river and do things there. And that, in the midst of a pandemic, wasn't something that was going to happen. Then, if I leave on the side the COVID-19 crisis, The second thing is that these co-creation processes are very open-ended processes, and they don't have a very well-defined objective or destination at the beginning, or at least in Cisco, they didn't have something like really established. And for some people, like having the sky as the limit was an amazing opportunity to create and to think outside of the box. But for some others, the chaos that surrounds this type of processes was something they couldn't cope very well with, and they quickly became demotivated. So that was quite problematic. And this builds into the next thing we learned about, and it's how powerful a prototype can be and how powerful it is to work with an actual thing or solution to help you generate new ideas and move forward. Maybe if a process is stuck working with something, it really proved to be very useful. And I think many of the labs we were working with didn't quite know the power of this prototype. And then in terms of stakeholders, I think previous panelists in the policy panel as well have acknowledged some of the things I'm going to say now, but I think it's important to keep in mind that there's 4 or 5 elements we don't have to forget, and sometimes I believe even if we know them, we keep on forgetting them, and that's the need for empathy and to understand who's the stakeholders you're working with and why they think the way they think and where they are coming from. That's one. And then one that I think when we were talking about, sometimes when we talk about, and I think especially when you talk about nanotechnologies, there's been a lack at some points of transparency. And I think this is a key element in order to have a successful stakeholder engagement strategy, I'd say. And then being capable of building trust. And finally, I would say that, each of the stakeholders that we work with, and this is something that Thomas has just said, that each of the stakeholders that take part in these processes have their own commitments and they have a limited amount of time. And especially, I think at the time of the pandemic, this was even more difficult and to find time to do things. So I think that for this reason, it is important to give value to the time they invest in working with you in your project and give recognition to that. And I think those were, in terms of stakeholder engagement, the very basic things I wanted to say. But in terms of institutional change, or better said, institutional learnings, I think that many of the labs we've worked with, they knew already a lot about stakeholder engagement. Still, they said that doing these co-creation processes using design methodologies, they still learned a lot. And finally, they acknowledge that they've learned a lot also about co-creation and the co-creation processes, and that it's helped them test new approaches, and above all, also understand things they were doing or intuitions they had, to put them in a methodological framework and gain self-consciousness and reflexivity. So I think that would be it. And finally, I would want to leave saying that one of our partner says, and I like it very much, that relinquishing institutional ego before commencing the co-creation process is a central step into this collaboration. And with this, I think I would leave my learnings and I would move on to what to do next. So yeah, I get a bit angry, and it's like my colleagues don't want me to get started on this, but I think that when we speak about co-creation, sometimes the institutions, organizations, and everyone takes this word very lightly. And they say, yes, we're doing co-creation because they just started a Miro board with some stakeholder. Well, I think we need to be a bit careful with what we use as words. And if we say that we're doing co-creation, we should be aware of what it really entails and means. And the power, and that we will have to let go of power. And I'm not sure that when we say that we want to co-create things with citizens, we really, institutions are really letting go of power, are really aware of this. So I would say that would be my first comment or rant. And then I would say that I think, and I'm talking now here about the European level, which is the one I am more familiar with, throughout the past 2 framework programs, at least, I think that the European Commission has built an amazing knowledge base. There's a huge number of super interesting projects with really relevant outcomes, guidelines, toolkits, etc., about co-creation, about societal engagement. I think that the Commission should go back to that when building the next framework program.
You need to start to wrap up, please.
I wrap up. My final thing is to say that I think I agree with Wim that that societal engagement should be part of the new framework program. It should be ingrained in any strategy. And finally, I agree with Kutoma that it should not be a tick the box exercise. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen. Very interesting. Many interesting points. I think also this making innovation tangible, that when debating nanotechnology or certain innovations, to have the things on the table for the participants to relate to is really adds a new dimension. It improves the quality, I think, of the interaction. So very interesting point. So with that, thank you. I guess there will be more questions for you as well, and we will see you later in the panel. So next up now is Dr. Ditte Deinbol. She's a colleague of our Danish colleagues in this project. She's a senior project manager at the Danish Board of Technology Foundation. She has a research background in science and technology studies, where she has been particularly interested in the interface between scientific advice and policy. At the Danish Board of Technology, she has worked with the public and stakeholder engagement, particularly in relation to innovation, technology, and environmental management. She is the coordinator of the Reconfigure project, and we now look forward to hear some of the lessons and perspectives from that project. Dear Dr. Deinbol, dear Ditte, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Harold. Thanks. I'll just start sharing here my presentation. There. Great. Do you see just the presentation? Great. Okay, so thanks for this opportunity to share some of our findings from Reconfigure. And thanks for all the interesting inputs so far. They have been really inspiring. Reconfigure is funded by the Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Program. We have 12 partners, and we've been running since May 2018. So this is our last year. I will introduce you very briefly to the project to leave time to share some findings with you. And after that, I'll reflect upon ways forward on working for the inclusion of society and innovation in Horizon Europe and elsewhere. Reconfigure is occupied with the inclusion of civil society through partnerships in quadruple helix collaboration. So that's partnerships involving the 4 helixes: public sector, academia, industry, civil society. So rather than public engagement, this is actually inclusion through partnerships. The normative idea behind the concept is that when bringing these logics and agendas of these 4 helixes together, the resulting solutions will be more robust and in line with the needs of society. But existing literature gives us little knowledge of how such partnerships work in practice. So, Reconfigure is designed to study and facilitate real-life cases on quadruple helix collaborations, and we're doing so in 5 social labs. We have labs in Europe and South America, and here we've been working to obtain a better understanding of quadruple helix collaborations, and we've been particularly occupied with the presence and role of civil society. And then we have, through interventions in these collaborations, worked to help foster the interaction and inclusion of all the helixes in the innovation process. And here we've been occupied with 3 main research interests. So the one is the practice of quadruple helix collaborations. It's the relation between these collaborations and RRI principles. And then finally, we've been looking at the effect of governance, legal and governance frameworks on quadruple helix collaborations. So getting to the first question, what have we learned about societal engagement for RRI in Reconfigure? First of all, we've identified a gap between the theory behind the quadruple helix collaborations and the actual practice of these collaborations. We've learned that there are myriads of real-life barriers of all kinds to proper collaboration across the 4 helixes. And these barriers, I'll get back to them, some of them in greater detail later, but they are particularly related to funding, the distribution of roles across the partnership, incentives for entering the collaboration, the distribution of power structures, and then path dependency, so former history of partnership among the partners. And most of these barriers tend to be particularly evident when it comes to civil society. We found, among other things, that it's quite hard to find proper partnerships involving civil society as a full-fledged partner, actually holding decision-making powers of any kind. And often civil society involvement ends up taking on the form of public engagement or even public consultation rather than partnership, even though the intentions may be there. And also civil society tends to enter the process at a later stage in the process on conditions which are formulated by partners from other helixes. So whereas the theory behind quadruple helix collaborations is actually highly valuable as a normative, prescriptive concept, it's not really descriptive of the real life cross-sector collaborations that we've been studying in our social labs. Based on the observations that we and experiments in our labs, and also the outcome of some workshops we've had with innovation practitioners and policymakers, we've identified a series of guidelines to practitioners involved in partnerships. But we've also concluded that barriers for collaborations are substantial and that they require also some structural responses, with governance and legal frameworks and so on, to be properly addressed. So, looking forward, going forward, what could we do, both in terms of funding and in terms of policy and so on? First of all, funding is crucial. Inclusive processes to align different agendas and worldviews are costly and time-consuming. So particularly civil society is often weak in this regard, with no real financial powers of their own to engage in such processes. And also it's evident that in all our labs that quadruple helix collaborations, those we've been working with, are fragile and changeable due to the heterogeneous constellation of partners. There are very different objectives. There are and the composition of partners change over time. They will have different time frames, and the role distribution will also be likely to change over time. We've also observed, for example, legal disputes over contracts and patents, changes in persons representing the organizations involved, which will also change the course of the collaboration, etc. So all these unknowns fit badly with the current conditions of funding. So to support quadruple helix collaborations, funding should include novel modes of resource allocation, which allows for with flexible frameworks, allowing for adaptation and failure and experimentation. Also, funding should foster civil society engagement and make it an actual evaluation criteria. And also we need funding to support learning communities and infrastructure for collaborative innovation. And also as we actually know little yet about the actual practice of quadruple helix collaborations, we also need more research to provide empirical insights on how to support such partnerships.
You need to wrap it together now, Dita.
Yes, okay. There's also a need for raising awareness and promoting good practice, because we have observed hesitation among actors to work cross-sector, and there are a lot of challenges involved. So we need good practice examples of the benefits and challenges. We need training and communication of collaboration methods and so on. And finally, we need policy instruments to change the dominance of rather business-oriented innovation, and to acknowledge various civil society groups, and this is all the way from small CSOs to NGOs and other kinds of interest groups. And we also need training programs and supporting infrastructure for innovation collaborations. Yes, I think that's it. Harold?
Yes, thank you, Dita. Very interesting. And I see some kind of convergence between the speakers so far. I see there's some common interest. And I think also in your presentation and your project, addressing the quadruple helix is very interesting. And I think this also resonates somewhat, at least with the finding with the Consider project. And I think all the presenters have done a great job so far. And we have one presenter left, so I guess he feels the heat. So our next presenter is Dr. Robert Brown. He is an associate professor at the Institute for Advanced Studies in Vienna in Austria. He earned his PhD in philosophy at the University of Budapest. His main research interest is in the politics of societal transformations, and he is currently involved in research projects on issues of inclusion and societal impacts of autonomous mobility. But today he will present insights, lessons, and perspectives from the New Horizon project. Dear Dr. Brown, dear Robert, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I do feel the heat, so I will try to live up to the expectations. And here is my screen. I hope you see it. Being the last is not easy, and definitely not easy, as it seems that we're together with Dita showing a downturn in how great the picture of inclusion and social engagement is. Today I'll speak about RI mainly because that's our remit. New Horizon is about mainstreaming RI. So I will try to answer the questions on the social engagement and co-creation through answering the questions and showing some findings about mainstreaming RI. And I don't go into the details, you'll hear it anyway. Our remit is mainly policy. So basically social engagement and co-creation can be, although I agree with Harold that RI encompasses more than social engagement and co-creation, still I think RI, as it is about the potential implications and social expectations and also involving social actors to work together, I think RI does represent the policy attitudes towards social engagement and co-creation in policy. As said, my main focus is on the policy level, and I will try to get to what we call policy implementation challenges. We did our research on the macro, meso, and micro level, and all of them point towards conceptual challenges and policy paradigm options. What we did, we also used like Reconfigure, which we are also involved with, social apps. Our remit was to look at the whole of H 2020, and we created 19 social apps representing the different program lines. And not only did we analyze what's happening in RRI, but we also co-created and engaged stakeholders in coming up with policy suggestions, even if Horizon Europe, as you all know, is not very much focused on RRI. Two major publications to date. One is in Science magazine, and this kind of sums up our findings in the European Commission or the European Union. Responsibility is a normative political wish or a normative political position.
Robert, sorry to interrupt, but somebody has a problem seeing your presentations, and I think maybe you should change. So because now we see your slide view, so I don't know if you. I think you should go up to display settings and then
display settings.
Yeah, and yes.
Is it better now?
Yes, excellent.
Oh, okay.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I won't wrap up what has been said before. So anyway, so two publications, one in Science magazine in July. Basically what we say there is that responsibility is a normative political wish as opposed to properly implemented policy in the European Commissions. And we suggest in another publication in Responsible Innovation, social labs that are an appropriate way to address the challenge of engagement and co-creation on multiple levels, especially focusing on RRI. So the question was, why did RRI not emerge and continue as influential funding instrument and implemented policy? And we came up with 4 elements of the fragility of RRI: semantic, financial, legal, and institutional. And I'll explain the 4 elements. As you know, the semantic fragility is related to what we call the definition debate. From 2007 onwards, RRI has a long history. However, there was a debate about what it is, what it encompasses, what it's called, science in society, RRI keys, and the 3O strategy, all of which made it fuzzy from a semantic point of view what RRI really is and should entail. And this is one of the results, the financial fragility. It started with 88 million. It, in H 2020, received 462 million in the SWAFS program line, and in Horizon Europe, it phased out. And there's a tiny little bit of funding in the reforming and enhancing the EU research and innovation system, but that's really tiny. So there is a strong financial fragility of RRI. And there is a legal framing problem also. RRI is explicitly mentioned in the legal documents that have been created for H 2020, and then it moved towards being only a cross-cutting issue in Horizon Europe. And there are debates about how gender, ethics, open science, etc. fit together, and there is no legally binding, but only guidance documents for interpretation. There's a strong institutional fragility of RRI in the SWAFS units. As you know, this is what we call the bureaucracy issue. In 2014, there was a separate SWAFS unit set up. By now, this is dissolved in 2019, and currently there is no institutional setup that is responsible for RRI in Horizon Europe. So we use the theory of advocacy coalitions. Advocacy coalitions are groups that have a shared belief system, and they coordinate their activities over time. The three problems, the definition debate, the legal freedom problem, and the bureaucracy issue, all have prohibited or seriously hindered these groups to effectively set up a coalition that was successful in maintaining RI in the next framework program. There are three coalitions that we look at. There's a pro-RI coalition, there's a de facto RI coalition, and there is a critiques of RI coalition. And as you see, everything points against the pro-RI coalition. They have weak resources. Their strategy is messy. The core value is not confirmed, and the actors are RFOs and RPOs, so mainly research funding and research performing organizations, whereas the de facto RI coalition has medium resources and is in a much stronger position related to the makers of research policy in the European Commission, and then the RI critics and actors who are unaware of RI have a very strong both institutional and resource position. Their core message or value is that excellent science is what is required with a technology push, and research ethics should be enough to answer social engagement. We compare this trajectory with the stability of the European Research Council, the ERC, which has a semantic stability, financial stability, legal stability, and institutional stability. It has created a very strong advocacy coalition. It's strong, diverse, pretty elite. It contains the scientific and scholarly communities, European industries, politicians, European Parliament and European Commission. And they have a very strong and unified policy message, constantly repeated. Without continuous investment into basic research, there will be no radical innovation in the future, innovation that has the potential of changing the technological paradigm of how the economy functions. This is repeated and conveyed loudly. It has a strong institutional stability because it's funded within the framework program, but it is funded through self-governance and autonomy. It has a bureaucratic element, the European Research Council Executive Agency, with its own body of responsible and management applications and grants of the ERC. So the answer to our question is that the RI advocates, we could not build an advocacy coalition with a unified message, strong institutional embeddedness within the European Commission, and supporters within and in the orbit of the research and innovation ecosystem. So my conclusion...
Okay, your conclusion, you're wrapping up. That's good. Excellent. Thank you.
I'm a pro. If I promise to talk 10 minutes, I will talk 10 minutes. So my conclusion, our conclusion is that to overcome A to C, RI advocates should develop a strong and unified policy message instead of focusing on definition, find key policy brokers in and outside the European Commission, and effectively connect RI to current changes in socioeconomic condition, sustainability, responsibility, mistrust, maybe COVID, and RI can transform thus into an integral element of European research and innovation funding. I'm so sorry that I wasn't more positive. I do think that as opposed to the earlier session, which painted a rather positive or optimistic picture, our analysis shows much more pessimism towards RI and the take-up of engagement and co-creation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Robert. Very nice. A slightly different take than the other three. More of a theoretical approach, but very interesting. May I ask all the panelists in this that have spoken now to turn on their videos? So everybody can see your brave faces. I might have gotten this wrong, but I think Lise, you have now my chat moderator and will say something about the questions from our audience.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Okay. So I was also really very intrigued by all of these 4 presentations. I thought there was some really interesting, great points. I, of course, saw some overlaps with our presentations, but also I think you raised really some new questions and additional challenges in your presentation. So yeah, really thank you very much. But going to now the Q&A and seeing what has come in there of questions. There are a few, well, actually all the questions are addressed specifically to some of the speakers, but that doesn't, I think, prevent others from also replying. But the first question that came in was for Kutoma. So this, I'm reading the question. It's Dear Kutoma, thank you for sharing lessons learned in Consider. Have some recommendations been implemented since then and showing what works in practice?
Hi, thank you very much for your question. We have, I assume some recommendations have indeed been implemented, and I think I can sort of give examples via other projects that I have been involved with. So, for example, I'm working on a project known as the RING project, which is Responsible Research and Innovation networked globally. And one of the things that this particular project does is to look at effecting mutual learning by having different stakeholders participate across the globe. So in that respect, I would imagine that now, I don't know if I should say that, you know, this has been because of the Consider project, so I'm not going to say that, but I think you can actually see that the importance of having this sort of responsible engagement is filtering through more current and, I suppose, projects that will come beyond the Horizon 2020 project. So I imagine that, yes, these recommendations have actually been taken into consideration, and there is a lot more desire to involve CSOs in research. And also, I think there's a lot more desire from the part of the CSOs to be involved in research. So I think, yes, the recommendations are kind of working and being taken up, because one of the things also that I have seen, like from the RING project, is reference to the Consider project as well. So in that respect, I would imagine that recommendations are actually being effected.
Yes, Lisa, do you have further questions for any of the panelists?
Yes, I do, and several. But one here is upvoted, and that's a question for you, Didde. The question is, Dear Didde, thanks for the interesting presentation. Do you think the transition to societal challenge-driven innovation will strengthen the position of CSOs?
Thank you. That is an interesting question. And yes, indeed, I think so. I mean, civil society organizations do bring other things, interests, objectives to the table. I'll tell you a story from the Danish Social Lab, which I think is really illustrative, because we have been working there with some actors that are a mix of public sector and industry, water utility companies, and they have voiced that working together in collaborations like this with civil society has actually legitimize their interest in those issues, because they have, as utility companies, they have rather narrow guidelines for what they can do and how they can act. They have their own agendas and so on. But working in partnerships, they can move beyond these very narrow agendas and address some of these societal concerns as well. Just to give an example of how working in partnerships like that will help the individual actors move beyond their own logics, and in that way create room for other concerns. Also, I mean, the logics, it's persons working in these, they are not public sector. They are people with concerns themselves and so on. So this is a way for them to move a bit beyond the framework of their organization. So I indeed think that partnerships is an interesting way forward.
Yes, I think maybe I could chip in with a question here, because I think what also goes across these 4 presentations is the question of power asymmetry between, be it NGOs or citizens, and particularly maybe then the hard sciences. So and how can we? It seems it's a problem, this power asymmetry. Maybe it's not perceived in the same way from both sides. I think in the Consider project, it was very interesting that the NGOs thought they had their expectations and their understanding of their role was quite different from what was understood from the other participants. But this question of power asymmetry, we could start from the Kotuma. What do you think could be done to address this power asymmetry or overcome it in some way?
Thanks, Harold. I think, yeah, this element of power asymmetry is very much alive, and I think it's there because obviously there's been this aspect of researchers, what, for lack of a better term, would be termed as bona fide traditional researchers, having been researching over a long period of, so they have that experience. And so there is then that aspect, the feeling that they have a lot more power to set the research agenda, to set the research methodologies, and then to sort of invite along other participants. And in that respect, other participants then just come in as maybe add-ons where the research agenda has already been set, where research methodologies have been set or expected to be set or to be driven by traditional researchers. And in that aspect, it becomes quite problematic. And so what needs to happen is that from the onset, I think all the stakeholders need to understand that they all bring something to the table, albeit differently, but that what they bring to the table should be valued in equal measure, because the expertise is different, and it's different in many forms, and that's why you have the different people that are coming to the table to bring that particular expertise. So during the Consider project, we discovered that civil society organizations were kind of feeling like, okay, we're just there to sort of disseminate, you know, a research that's already been looked at or decided, research outcomes that have been decided by other people. And so there's that disconnection. So having to sort of make sure that each and every partner is valued, their contribution is valued, is quite an important thing to do. And that can be through awareness, it can be through, you know, right from the onset, having people contribute their expertise in whichever way that they can, and then looking at how best to then sort of distribute this sort of understanding right throughout the research process to the research outcomes.
Okay, Carmen, do you have any comments from your background?
From my perspective, I think I coincide with Kutoma a lot. I think there's also there's a need to design processes that are adequate to cope with these power asymmetries, and to make sure that they acknowledge them, and that the design process is in place to try and minimize those. I'd say I would go back to and I think that the lab I talked about that said that relinquishing institutional ego before commencing one of these processes is necessary is one of them. And I think that if you engage in such processes, you need to be aware that you need to let go of power, and that things are probably not going to go the way you want them to go. They will go they will go some way, some unexpected way, for sure. So yeah, that would be my take.
And I'm also thinking here that we heard that in the last session that scientists, of course, are part of society. So this should be evident that society is relevant here. But what are your recipe, Dita, for power asymmetries?
Oh wow.
some preliminary thoughts.
Yeah, no, but I think there's one thing which is really, I think funding is very crucial here, because process is time consuming and tiresome and so on. And it's both important in order for the other partners to be able to take time to engage in such a process. And it's also important in order to involve civil society as a partner in their own right, and not merely on the conditions of other partners and on the funding of other partners. So I think that's very important, and also making funding allow for all these messy processes that we will see when we involve other kinds of actors.
Yes, thank you. Very interesting. And then finally, Lisa, I know you are eager to sum up, but I think maybe Robert could have just a few sentences on this issue of power asymmetries, and because you had a rather bleak view of the future for RI, but still.
I'm not very optimistic, and the simple reason is that power asymmetry is not a given, and neither asymmetry is not given, and this is what the others have been dealing with, but power is a social construct. And the problem with the current construct is that it is excellence, technology optimism, technology push, etc., that animates the heuristic of power. So you might want to change the asymmetry, but as a social constructivist, I would rather change the social construct of power. And once that's changed, then you can hope that certain societal groups who represent social values that are at the core of such social construct of power will gain more traction. And otherwise, it's an uphill battle, because you're trying to fight to get some more symmetry within the heuristic of a power structure that privileges the actors who push for excellence or who push for technology, etc.
Thank you. Then Lisa, over to you. I think you were going to sum up, aren't you?
Well, yes, not that I was eager to, because there were also a few more questions in the chat, actually. But well, some of it, there were two questions for Carmen. There was one from Andrea, who was really intrigued by this quote or citation that you mentioned, but now you actually repeated it again. So this need to leave your institutional ego at the door somehow when you enter into a co-creative process. And you also just spoke about, again, this need to relinquish control, which was the second question that was in there. And I think the other parts that also really came up in your talk, but also in the comments, for example, by Dita and Kotoma, and is this resource intensive and time consuming aspects of wanting to try to do these processes, and actually realizing that doing it, yeah, it's not just something that you just do, but it's something that is really hard, and it's also, as Dita said, messy at times. So it can be, all of those aspects came out, I think, in what you were talking about. And then Robert actually here in his last comment, again, because one of the questions that I wanted to ask is on his perspectives or opportunities on building this kind of coalition. But now you also provided your rather, again, bleak outlook on the chances of that happening. So I think we have managed to get around everything. And I hope that we could have just a brief look at drawing that Søren has been working on throughout the last 3 hours to try to represent everything that we have been talking about. Søren, are you there? And then please, could you share with us your work?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I put on shared screen through the break, and somebody took over control of my screen, so I can't share it at the moment.
This must be our technical facilitators who are keeping you in check, I think.
I didn't get to my seat before the break was over. So can I start my video? Yes.
Yes, I think they're working about giving you back control.
Thank you.
Power.
Yeah.
Yes. And I'll go here, and we start sharing. So can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we see.
So throughout this process, I've just been listening to all what you have talked about, and it's been a lot of information, and it's been very exciting. So I try to see it as if I were doing visual notes on what we had talked about. So this is the first one where we talked about, you know, the social value from society needs and so forth, and so it's kind of going to into from social and the needs and so forth into how to co-create.
So if I may, Søren, what you were trying to depict here, that's my interpretation of drawing, is really the positive message of supporting and wanting to integrate and co-create and involve society more.
Yes.
That was the first session of today.
Yes.
Can I ask you to show us what you got out of the second session?
Yes, that's kind of a summing up. I couldn't make time to illustrate for all the speaks, because some of you had 10 minutes, and it took a little longer for me than 10 minutes. But I can remember talked about. So this is what I summoned up for co-creation. And also because I get these buzzwords from you, so it's, you know, like round table and so forth, and how it involves each other. And then also there were a lot about gender issues. So I couldn't help myself by making this drawing.
Okay.
So
there's some gaps and,
yes.
and some letters that must be clients. It looks like by a male scientist, but I'm not sure if is that on purpose.
No, it goes fast sometimes, and I'm open for if people could you do such and such afterwards. Yeah. It's up for correction for. Yeah. I've done all the illustrations, so it can be cut out and made on social media and so forth.
Okay, thank you very much, Søren. Do you have more drawings, or is this the last one?
This is the last one for today.
Okay. I wanted to also just highlight to the participants who are out behind the screens that there is a poll right now in the Slido Q&A asking you what you take with you home from today's session, just in case you haven't seen it yet. Also, we will collect those answers, I think, while we slowly transition into the more informal part of our conference, because Right now, time's up. We have reached, let's say, the allotted slot from when we promised how much we were allowed to spend of your time. Harald, I don't know if you want to. I certainly want to thank all the speakers who participated in this session for very stimulating and interesting insights. Some of it corroborating what we have also found, and other certainly adding to our experience. So I think that was really valuable, and I hope also that the speakers in this session got something out of participating.
Yes, I will also emphasize their flexibility as this event turned from from before summer physical, and then postponed several times, and you stood by us. So we are very happy for that as well. In as Carmen touched upon on the various effects of COVID, for instance, in launching a conference like this online, which I think has, well, in my, of course, I'm a bit biased, but I think it's been very, very good. And we're getting used to this now, and professional in both listening to and participating in the digital conferences.
Yes,
so thank you all.
We didn't lose a single speaker in the transition, and it was that also a bit of a messy process. So thank you for standing with us in this. Okay, so there should be now. I have lessons coming in the Slido Q&A. Interesting lessons and food for thought. So there's appreciation really of also from the audience. It's hard to resolve the issue of power symmetry. A lot coming in on this power asymmetry, but there is also optimism. So not only pessimism in the Q&A. There's a way to go, but the path is yes, steep. They thought really new, interesting insights. There are good suggestions, positive ideas also. Now I must go down. Yes, really, again, about the social constructs and how hard that must be to solve. But I think there are some members maybe of this new coalition in the audience, because they're also saying that we need to address it. We should try still to do something. Okay. There should be now coming up in the YouTube chat a link to the audience members also, so they are able to join this Zoom chat room. Until now, the Zoom chat room has been reserved for technical facilitation and speakers, but we would like to now invite everyone to join us in this Zoom room and just participate in a bit more of a casual hangout for as long as you have the opportunity and time. So thank you everyone for today, and now we will just leave a few minutes to make this transition.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the organizing.